Good evening, folks, and welcome to Enemy Within. It's Tuesday, the 17th of November, 2015, and we're on peoplesinternetradio.com, where we are, as always, seeking solutions. And tonight, myself and Tom, we've got a guest that I've been trying to track down for a while, and we've finally managed to get the technology rigged up so we can speak to him on the phone. I'd like to welcome to the show Dr. Barrie Trower. Good evening.
It's just Barrie.
Oh, Barrie. Okay. Yeah. Good evening, Barrie. Looking at your biography on your Facebook page there, it says Dr. Barrie Trower is a former Royal Navy microwave weapons expert and a former Cold War captured spy debriefer for the UK intelligence services. And then it goes on through your training. I mean, wow, that's quite some life you've had there.
I'd like to just correct you straight away. As far as I know, I'm not a doctor. I have degrees, but in this country, none of them are doctorates. I do know other countries seem to have made me a doctor, but not in this country. And I tend not to use it for legality reasons.
Oh, okay, that's fair enough, yeah. We always like to be corrected if we're getting things wrong. We're seeking solutions, but I think before we look for those solutions, we have to really look at what the problems are that we're facing. And in particular, I think the problems from microwaves. Could you tell us a little bit of the basics of your research, please?
Well, we're going back to when I started studying microwave technologies, which was 1959. And microwaves then, and when I was in the military, microwaves were used as a weapon. They were also used by the military for radar and booby trapping mines, things like that. The microwave technology was involved in sort of explosive warfare as well. And as I say, radar and sort of mind control, causing people to develop cancer, all sorts of neurological and physiological illnesses. So in the Cold War, microwaves were used as weapons. Hence my coming out of retirement to try and warn people today, because, and it's not me that has just published this, a captain of military intelligence has also published that it is known, and has been known since the 50s, that one of the most lethal frequencies is 2.4 gigahertz, which is pretty meaningless to most people, but if you translate that into ordinary English, it's Wi-Fi. So what we are doing is we are putting what is known and tested and used as one of the most lethal microwave war frequencies known to cause harm. We are giving that to children in classrooms to use as an education tool. We are giving it to children to carry around as cell phones, and pregnant women to use. And the government knows the dangers, they know what's going to happen, but they are doing absolutely nothing about it for no other reason, really, than to make profit.
Yeah, well, that takes me to a remark that you said that you is attributed to you at a conference in Birmingham. You said that the government, industry, and government scientists will be responsible for more deaths of civilians in peacetime than all the terrorist organizations ever. The evidence you have is showing this is correct. You put your money where your mouth is and stand your ground. It's easy to prove that Tetra is not safe. That's the police radio system, but it works on a similar set of It works on microwaves, doesn't it?
There are two things here, sir. I've actually updated that talk that you're referencing now. I was speaking at the Institute of Neuroscience in Germany not too long ago to an international body of scientists and government officials. Mm-hmm. And I said that this industry, with the people supporting it, will now be responsible for more suffering and deaths than our plague of the 1340s and our plague of the 1660s, the European plagues, added together. It is almost a genocide with what is going on here. And the figures are starting to support this. Tetra, I was commissioned by the Police Federation to write the initial Tetra report. I was subsequently, 9 years later, commissioned by a higher police authority to write another report. And you're absolutely correct. The pulse frequency of Tetra is one which is absolutely disastrous to the neurological and physiological makeup of the people carrying it. And just one Christmas, and I wrote this in my second report, the higher confidential report, that a few years ago, I had, I think it was independently 5 different policewomen over just a 12-week period, sitting in my room here in my house, crying their eyes out with throat and breast cancer. And all of them had been victimized to say nothing, or they would lose their pensions, they would be moved stations, but they were all being victimized and didn't know where to turn. So Tetra is not a very safe thing, and it's an experiment. Anyway, in the government documents, they actually say that Tetra is an experiment which is due to continue until 2018, and it is a study to look for brain tumors, neurological damage, and other cancers. So it's actually a living study.
So once again, the human population are being used as guinea pigs by the powers that be, essentially without our knowledge. But thanks to yourself, that knowledge is now available for anyone who cares to look at it, isn't it?
Well, it is, but it's like most things. The knowledge is there about microwaves and illnesses to children, pregnant women, but you've got to know what to look for, what to ask for, where to find it. Mm-hmm. They're not easy papers to get hold of, and a lot of them are not very easy to read. I mean, with due respect to a lot of the very clever scientists writing papers, unless you have a degree in physics or higher mathematics or neurobiology or something, you're really not going to understand them.
Right. So, I mean, obviously the police using this radio system, which it appears not only causes cancers, but it also makes police officers extremely aggressive, which I think we can all see the evidence of that with our own eyes. Just take a look at any news program. But the one that really bothers me so much is that Wi-Fi is almost a compulsory thing in many schools in this country now. Yet, from talks I've heard you do recently, apparently many nations are removing it from schools.
You're absolutely correct, sir. You've jumped from one side of the fence to the other here with two totally different topics. I'll go back to the first with Tetra. I lecture all over the world. Mm-hmm. And I've said on many occasions that when I go to a country, I am generally hijacked by the police or the ambulance service or the military And I say to them, you don't need me to prove this. Go to any police station, anyone that has had Tetra for 18 months or more, anyone, and it's got more than 100 staff working there. I will guarantee, if the statistics are being honestly kept, I will guarantee that there are more cases of police violence, more cases of police cancers, there will be more general sickness than before, and there will certainly be more vehicle crashes by police. And to date, not a single country has been able to say, you are wrong, we have checked this. I know they have checked it, and I know that I am correct. That is one side of the story. The other side of the story, the Wi-Fi, to my knowledge now, and I do lecture a lot, about 58% of the world, 58% of the world have now switched on to the dangers of Wi-Fi and are either taking it out of school or limiting access to children to several hours a week or whatever, usually banning the very young children from being exposed to it altogether. So they are either taking precautions or taking it out, and it's about 53% of the world, I think. It's certainly over half.
Wow. Have you got anything you wanted to come in there with, Tom?
I wanted to ask how much exposure you would actually have to this microwave technology for it to be a big danger.
I'm sorry, you're breaking up. I can't hear you.
How much exposure to the microwave technology would you need to have for it to be a big danger?
I'm sorry, I still can't understand you.
Sorry, Tom was just asking how much exposure an individual would need to the microwaves to be affected.
It depends on lots of factors. First of all, it depends on whether you are a child or an adult. Because with children, and a lot of people think that children are sort of smaller versions of adults. And that is absolutely incorrect. Children are not small adults. They are neurologically and physiologically different. The water content of their body is much higher, which makes them much more liable to absorb microwave radiation and much more prone to harm. In fact, children can absorb sort of 60% more microwave radiation than an adult for lots of reasons that would be too lengthy to go into now. So there is one factor. Another factor would depend on your general state of health, because if you are sick or elderly or a child, microwaves are going to affect you more than if you're sort of a young 25-year-old. And the question, it's a bit like saying, how many cigarettes can I smoke before I start to show signs of illness? And the answer is, well, some people will start showing signs straight away, others it will be months, others years. And everybody is different. We are not all homogeneous. We are not all the same. Everybody knows somebody who has a grandmother who smoked 50 cigarettes a day and drank a bottle of whiskey and lived till she was 112 and never sneezed. Other people would be ill instantly. So in relation to how many microwaves will make you sick, there are in fact about 4,500 different factors involved, and we really can't go through all of those today.
No, so it's very difficult to give a broad answer to that. But from what I understand, there is actually no safe level of microwaves, is there?
Well, there isn't. The same as there really is no safe level of cigarette smoke. Some people are, and this has been known and written about by our government. Some people are what we call electrosensitive or electro-hypersensitive. You only have to get them near microwaves and they start to feel incredibly ill, like you've got the worst flu in the universe. And even if you turn the microwaves off, they can still suffer for up to 6 weeks afterwards. And this can be men, women, any age, and it's known as electrosensitivity. And from studies around the world, you're looking at a minimum in any country of just over 3%, which is about 1.8 million people in this country. When I gave the annual lecture to the Irish Doctors Association, they believed it could be as high as 15%.
Whoa.
So it's certainly not less than 3%, and could be approaching 15%. So what we're doing is we're actually making an awful lot of people very, very sick. And again, for no other reason, and this is in writing by government, no other reason than to protect, I'm using their words, protect industrial output, or in a single word, profit. So we are deliberately, our government is deliberately making people ill. It is deliberately killing people. It is deliberately harming pregnant women. It is deliberately causing illness and death in children for no other reason, and it is written down, than to protect industrial output.
That's quite a statement there, but having looked at some of your evidence and heard some of your talks, it's not beyond stretching the imagination to believe that, and particularly in light of all the other things we find the government do that are not really in our interest.
Well, I mean, I can take this one stage further, sir. Excuse me. When it was realized that all of these devices were addictive, especially by children, and becoming popular, I mean, what we were really left with then was a runaway train. And in order to protect themselves, and this is in writing, the 40-odd% of the world who are really doing nothing, namely the Western civilizations, us included, what they said we would do, we would follow the rules laid down by it's basically a private club of scientists who have nominated themselves advisors and have been accepted by these governments, basically to protect the governments. It's the International Commission for Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection. It's about 19 people. And what they said was, what we will do is we will make a safety level that cannot be argued against. And their safety level for around 42% of the world now, they said, if you do not feel too warm in 6 minutes of use, then we will do that safe. And that's it. So no matter what you buy, what you do, where you live next to any transmitter, whatever, provided you do not feel too warm in 6 minutes, it is deemed safe. So basically you could get a mobile phone, put it next to a brand newborn baby, and if the baby didn't complain in 6 minutes, then it is deemed safe to leave on next to that child permanently forever. And that is the stupidity of what we have got, the system, by around 40% of the planet. So if you don't feel too warm in 6 minutes, as far as the government are concerned, it is deemed safe, and that is it. And that is the only safety level there is.
That's incredible. I just find this information totally astounding, and it makes me wonder. You know, we've been given these technologies that are clearly damaging to our health. I mean, are you aware of any technologies that could perform similar functions that wouldn't be dangerous, Barry?
Well, there are several ways out of this, as I say when I'm lecturing.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to live with the danger. If we were to do away with all of the transmitters that are peppered all over the countryside now, if we do away with the transmitters and we feed all of the information by cable, that will reduce the risk enormously. And if the cable comes into the house and goes into your computer and into your phone,
mm-hmm.
then that's okay. If we reduce the output of the phones to an incredibly low level, where if you needed to use it in an emergency, which is what they were designed for, outside, you would be able to call an ambulance, but you wouldn't be able to download pornography or football or dating websites or something like that. You'd have to do that inside, connected to a cable. But it can be made safe. But in doing so, it will incur quite a lot of expense for the industry. They would lose an enormous amount of their profit, going into billions. And there are also devices patented by the industry that can prevent a lot of the microwaves going into the body from the cell phones. But they won't sell you those, because if they although they've patented them, if they announce that they're there and what they do, people will say, well, why am I using something that's not safe? So they're in a catch-22. So the best thing anybody can do is say, well, look, if you're not too warm after 6 minutes, it is deemed safe, enjoy yourself, and that's it.
Mm-hmm. Well, from a personal point of view, as soon as I became aware of how dangerous potentially Wi-Fi and mobile phone signals are, I pretty much took to switching my mobile phone off when I don't need to use it. And also, I've disabled Wi-Fi on my router, and everything's connected with an Ethernet cable. But I live in a block of flats, and the last time I checked for available Wi-Fi signals, I think there was about 27. So does that mean I'm really kind of peeing in the ocean by switching my own Wi-Fi off, or is it the most the closest signal that's doing the most harm?
Both. The problem, if you switch off any microwaves around you, and according to the World Health Organization, you really don't want to be exposed, particularly from a cell phone, to more than accumulatively, it's about 27 minutes a day.
Mm-hmm.
After that, from a cell phone, and I don't have the figures in front of me, I've got no bits of paper in front of me at all, but I know that it's something like after 10 years, you are, depending on your age and status, you are generally more likely to develop cancer from the microwaves than not. And that's 27 minutes a day. Now, you're also asking me that because you're in a block of flats and the signal is weaker, is that sort of less dangerous? And the answer is no.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm being perfectly honest here. I'm not out to upset people, but 4 of the world's leading professors that I can name if you wish, they have carried out experiments, and this is known anyway by people like myself, But a low level is as dangerous or even more dangerous than a short high level. And the reason is that if you are exposed to a short high level of microwaves, your body, which is an incredibly complex and ingenious device, your body will recognize that you are in trouble. It has special radiation devices in your body called like a nuclear core complex, protein 53, heat shock proteins. It has devices which will rush around and defend and repair your body. We developed those living in caves when we were cave people to help us cope with electric storms. So you do have devices that will protect you against microwaves. Now, the problem is when you have a very long, low level of microwave irradiation, like from a cell tower, sort of 500 meters away or something, the microwaves are so weak, but they're still coming into the body. And when microwaves come into the body, they react with the cells. They always react with the cells. But the reaction is so low and so slow that it is below the radar. The body cannot realize that it is in danger. So the radiation will go in. It will take much, much longer, but it will still do the damage and it will still cause cancer. So in terms of physiology, a long low dose is as or even more dangerous than a short high dose.
Okay, thanks for that, Barry. Tom, I've moved things around a little bit, so perhaps you could try and get a question in there if you've got one.
Can you hear me, Barry?
Yeah, I just about. Go on.
But when you were talking about warnings on things, the warnings are there in the literature in mobile phones, in the small print. And I've talked to a colleague of mine at work who used to work putting up Wi-Fi towers, and he said there's a...
I'm sorry, the signal's broken up.
Yeah, I thought so.
Sorry about that, Barry. Yeah, Tom was saying that if you look in the instructions with mobile phones, there are warnings there in very small print. And he was also saying that he had a colleague that worked installing these towers. And what was you going to say about that, Tom?
There's a small little sign that they have to put at the bottom of them that warns about the dangers of them.
Okay.
So he said he would go nowhere near them.
He said that there's a small little sign that they have to put at the bottom of the towers that warns of the dangers, and he pointed out that he wouldn't go anywhere near one.
There are, again, this is sort of a double-sided question. You are warned underneath the towers generally that if you have pacemakers or metal in your body, not to approach the tower. Because it can affect the signals in pacemakers or hearing aids, or it can affect the structure of the metal in the body, particularly if you have metal plating, orthopedic plating in the body. And then similarly, if you look in the books that come with cell phones, and I'll quote right across the board, with some of them you agree now not to join a class action to sue them for cancer should you develop it. It also warns that you should not use them if you are pregnant, if you are a child, unless it is an emergency. You are also warned not to hold the cell phone up against your skin. I think it must be 5/8 of an inch away from the body, which is rather contradictory. How do you hold it if it must be 5/8 of an inch away from the body? Again, there are all of these warning things in the back of the book in the small print, but very few people read them. And it also says, which amuses me, do not make a long call, or keep your calls short. Do not make a long call. And that one amuses me because generally a long call for me, unless I'm doing a radio interview like this, a really long call for me is about 3 minutes. If you talk to my wife, who hasn't spoken to her friend for a day and a half, and she's sitting with a cup of tea, a long call, you start counting hours. So when they say, do not make a long call, they do not define what is a long call. And it comes back to this, provided you don't feel too warm in 6 minutes, it is deemed safe. But what they don't tell you when the International Commission actually made this ruling is that all of your heat sensors are actually on the outside of your body, in your skin. Mm-hmm. Microwaves penetrate and cook from the inside out, which is how microwave ovens work. So what the International Commission are actually saying when they make this 6-minute rule about feeling too warm is, provided you don't feel too warm after 6 minutes, with the heat sensors that you don't actually have inside your body. So there is no way for you to detect the heat inside your body. So in fact, there is no way ever you could take them to court for feeling too warm after 6 minutes.
I see. So I've just got a question there popped up in the chat room, and they're asking, does that include dental fillings?
That's what I'm just having a sip of my orange juice while I'm talking to you.
No problem.
Yes. In a word, yes. Dental fillings. It's for the same reason. Whoever asked that question, would you compliment them on asking a really brilliant question?
Thank you, Babushka.
I hope the person is listening. It was a person phoning in, was it?
No, it's someone in the chat room. We've got a chat room where people can interact with us while we're talking. So that question...
Yeah, the person on the chat room, that is a brilliant question. And I'll tell you why. Because it involves, research has shown, it involves breast cancers and quite a few other illnesses. And I'll go into that. For the same reason you don't put any metal into a microwave oven. If you do, the metal absorbs the microwaves and then it re-emits waves at a slightly different wavelength or frequency. And sometimes you see it as sparks in the microwave oven. Now, again, if you've got metal in your mouth and you are microwaving the metal in your mouth, what that can do, it can absorb the microwaves, re-emit them at a different wavelength into the gums, into the salivary glands. And I have read research from one country where they have it, and I think it was a 2,000 to 3,000% increase in parotid salivary gland cancer, which is being solely put down for people holding cell phones up against the side of their face. And you can bet your bottom dollar that if you've got metal fillings in your teeth, that's certainly not going to help. And I'd like to come back to this. Research has been presented where ladies that have metal stays in their bras, it's like a metal cup underneath the bra, like a metal loop. It's in the shape of a parabola, which is like a semicircle. Ladies tend to carry cell phones over their shoulders in a bag right next to their mammary cells, next to their breasts. Research has shown that because cell phones will continue to signal a tower even when you've got them off.
Yeah.
They can continue because they tell the cell towers where you are. And when they're transmitting all the time, they're transmitting, as far as the lady is concerned, through the mammary cells. That can be detected and picked up by these parabolas, semicircles of metal in the bras. They are then, rather like the shiny bit in a torch behind the bulb, that can focus the microwaves into a very small area in the breast, just a few hundred cells. But for some reason, and oddly enough, I said this at a conference just about 2-3 weeks ago, I don't know why, and nobody did from the doctors in the conference, but it seems for some reason that the mammary cells in the breasts are particularly sensitive to microwave irradiation and cancers. And if you have continuously microwaves being focused into one small area in the breast, then of course you are running the risk of breast cancer. And I do know from when I was speaking at the conference, I think I had a list of it was well over 40 peer-reviewed, published in reputable scientific journals, over 40 research papers from universities linking breast cancer to cell phone radiation.
Mm-hmm. Well, I had an experience a couple of months back. I was at a conference and I'd forgotten to mute my phone, and it started ringing when someone was talking, so I hurriedly turned it off and put it in the inside breast pocket of my jacket. And within very few minutes, I felt extraordinarily ill. I was having palpitations. I felt like I was going to pass out. I thought I was going to be sick. I went outside and I suddenly thought, hang on, I've moved my phone. I've never had it in that pocket before. Put it into a different pocket, and within minutes I was fine again.
Absolutely correct, sir. Now, I have a paper that goes back, and in fact it's not even, then it wasn't even the most up-to-date one. I have a paper which is dated 1976. It is a government paper, and one of the things that they say the body is particularly sensitive to, including the heart, is microwave radiation. And the reason being that it can interact with the electrical signals of the heart. In fact, it can interact with any part of the body, any electrical signal, the brain, brain waves, the heart. But the heart is particularly singled out as an organ that is really sensitive to microwave irradiation.
Wow. Tom's just posted me a message of something that I'd not heard of, but he said the singer Sheryl Crow has said that her brain tumour was from mobile phone use. Had you heard of that one?
Sorry, the singer?
Sheryl Crow.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, she'd said
that. I mean, if you read the research papers which I read, in just one country, I had reports from one country, and they did a survey across 2 states, just 2 states, and they had in each state an average of 25,000 young people with tumours being attributed to cell phones. In each state, 25,000 being attributed to cell phones.
Wow.
And in fact, if you go to the New York Stock Exchange, by law, they have to list class actions. Now, a class action is if you can't afford to take an industry to court, and the mobile industry is without a doubt the most powerful on the planet now. If you really can't afford to take them to court, you can join what is known as a class action, where several thousand of you can club together and take them to court as a class action. Mm-hmm. The New York Stock Exchange has a list of class actions against the communications industry, which it must produce by law for anybody that wants to read them. And they are there to protect you from investing against an industry that is liable to be sued. And there are pages upon pages upon pages of class actions being levied against the communications industry. And wherever you go now, for an adult, as we say, the World Health Organization has said that if, as I said earlier, if you use a cell phone accumulatively for more than 27 minutes a day, after however many years, I think it's about 10, you are more likely to develop cancer than not. But studies on children have shown, the ones that I have read, studies on children show that it's around between 2.5 and 2.8 years before they are more likely to develop cancer than not.
Wow. I mean, something that's just sprung to mind, particularly you're saying about holding the phone 5/8 of an inch away. I think I've actually seen 1.5 inches in a small print of one leaflet I read some time back. But Babs in the chat room, the lady who pointed out the thing about the fill-ins, has also said that a lot of men carry them in their jeans pockets, so they're right next to the groin, so you're going to see a rise in testicular cancer, surely. And also...
Can I come in there while I've got my train of thought here?
Please do.
And this is going to shock... And I'm glad that lady, whoever she is brilliant.
Oh, she's a smart cookie.
Sorry?
She's a very smart cookie.
What you would call a hot cookie, yeah. That lady is brilliant, and I hope she's listening to this.
She is.
Talking about testicular cancer, it has been published, and I published it in a paper, which is now sort of circulating the world and winning in government and court cases. I published a paper that using government research and government documents, they expect for pregnant women being exposed to low-level microwaves, they expect around a 47.7% miscarry rate, or genetically damaged child. 47.7%. And I have published that with the proof. 47.7% miscarriage rate. Now, what that means, and this is why, and I don't put this down to me, there are lots of scientists doing this work in the world, and we tend to turn up at these conferences. But one of the things I say, and I'll get on to testicular cancer in a second, one of the things I say to government is, look, according to government figures, you are going to experience a 47.7% miscarry rate. Now, the mathematics for that is particularly simple. Within 60 years, the lifetime of just one person, within 60 years, you will be down to just 1/8 of your healthy children's population. And if you are down to 1/8 of your healthy children's population, where are you going to get the infrastructure to run your country? And that stops them in their tracks, because the only way now that a country can survive if it does nothing is to have mass immigration, like many countries at the end of the Second World War, where they needed people to run the health service, run the buses, the trains, build things. The only way you're going to survive as a country is to have mass immigration. That is where you are headed. Now, whether that stops them in their tracks or they think, oh dear, this is sad for the women, I don't know their reasons. I'm not really worried what the reasons are, provided they get rid of Wi-Fi. And this is why we've got something approaching 58% of the world now changing their mind because they will not cope as a nation. And when I speak at lectures on this and I say, well, if you think, well, I've got boys, they're safe, I'm afraid they are in as much danger, but the physiology is different because girls are born with all of their eggs in place, the 400,000 eggs. They are born with all of the eggs in place, and the eggs are irradiated permanently. With boys, or young gentlemen, the sperms are produced on a daily basis as and when they're needed. So it is a different sequence of damage, but there is plenty of research now, and I've cited it in my paper, that shows that you can get genetic damage in sperms, you can get other damage, main damage to the testes of the gentleman or boy. So there is an equivalent amount of danger, but it's over a different time period.
All right. Well, I was going to go on from the young men carrying them in their pockets, well, men of any age, carrying them in the pockets, to a really disturbing trend that I've seen quite recently. And I've seen one or two celebrities are doing it, and now a lot of other women are catching on, and that's carrying their mobile phones in their bras, which is, I wanted to scream as soon as I saw it. No. But, I mean, to go on from there, this is clearly...
Can I just come in on that?
Please do.
You've actually touched on an incredibly important... Again, two very important points. And can I answer this and then dash to the loo?
Of course, we'll play a tune and have a little break.
Okay, I'll answer this first. I spoke... I was a guest speaker of a GP in Somerset just 2-3 weeks ago, where there were doctors and scientists and people, and it may be on the internet. I don't know if it'll be on, but it was in Somerset just a couple of weeks ago. And there, if it is on the internet, one of the things I did, I held up a colour photograph of a lady who carried her cell phone for convenience in her bra. And it was a picture, quite a big colour photograph, of her breast. And it was the most cancerous breast that I certainly have ever seen. And some of the doctors actually came forward and had a good look at it. But she carried the cell phone in her bra. It is one of the things you really, really don't want to do. The same as carrying it in your trouser pocket if you're a man. And the reason is that some companies have the ability to use your cell phone even if it is totally switched off, not on standby, where you can get a call, where when you're moving around, it is transmitting anyway, because it's updating the cell towers where you are. What some of the countries, some of the companies can do is they can use your cell phone without your knowledge as a transmitting station. So if somebody is making a call to your right and it doesn't quite reach the tower, which is to your left, then their call can go to your cell phone, which is totally off. Mm-hmm. That can re-energize the signal and then broadcast it to the tower. The tower will then send a message back to your cell phone and then on to the third party. So in fact, you can become a walking cell tower without your knowledge. So even if you think I've got the phone off, I'm totally safe, I would assume you're not, because some of them can be turned on.
Wow. Thanks for that.
And I just need to go to the loo. I'll only be 30 seconds.
Okay, we'll all have a wee break. I'll play some tunes now then. Back in a few minutes.
Night and wonder what is wrong and right, and if this world is ever gonna change. I'm not religious, but if we are insignificant, then how and when did we become so strange? And then I think, what the hell, this is going well, and I can live without the pain. To me, if we are really truly free, then why do we all hide behind our lies? 'Cause insincerity is easier than honesty when you are looking someone in the eyes. And then I think, what the hell, this is going well, and I can live without the pain. To me, if you believe in all you see, you'll never have to ask the question why. Just let your mind run free, hey, compromise your sanity, and you will find you're reaching for the sky. And then I think, what the hell, this is going well, and I can live without the pain.
Hi folks, and welcome back to Enemy Within and this fantastic show where unfortunately Tom can't really join in because Barry can't hear him very well, so hopefully I can take up the slack. And we're joined for the second hour again by Barrie Trower. Hi Barry. Right.
Hello sir, yeah.
We covered quite a bit about mobile phones there, and I've got some other things that I've made notes from previous talks you've done. One thing that took my interest, I mean, you were saying about the Tetra being a massive experiment on the population without their knowledge. Something I came across was the use of microwaves and LSD on 4-year-olds.
Oh, that's going back to an experiment with it was MK Ultra, the CIA and the Canadian government. MK Ultra. Yep. There have been lots of experiments. I mean, we're not talking a few, we're talking hundreds of thousands over the years. I mean, even when I was in the military, and people find this hard to believe. And among my statements, one of the statements that I make even today, and I can qualify this, is that if you join the military or the police, you are more likely to die from the hand of a government scientist than any terrorist. When I was in the military in the 60s, and maybe some of your people will recognize this, our government requested 20,000 ordinary service personnel for flu injections. And it came to pass 50 years later that, in fact, the injections were nothing to do with flu. They were all sorts of chemical concoctions to decide how long you would survive and what you would die of. And they used 20,000 people without their knowledge, just to carry out an experiment. And this was not so long ago in the 60s. But our government has, and I won't go at length into this, our government has what's known as an active denial policy, whereby it takes 50 years to take them to court. And I think I've known in my lifetime 8 such cases reach the court. The last one in this country, or the last 2, was the 20,000 service personnel from the 60s, and roughly around the same time we experimented on the genitals of the gentleman in Africa. They managed to get to court, again 50 years later, and the government always has the same 3 answers. The first thing it says is, well, for the active denial policy, well, anybody involved is dead, who are you going to charge? And if that doesn't wear, they say that memories have to be impaired, so the case couldn't go to court because of memory impairment after such a long time. And if the judge throws that out, they come down with the Official Secrets Act and say, settle this out of court, we will not appear. It's called active denial, and our government are experts at it, along with several other governments. It's how they get away with what they get away with.
Yeah, I did also pick up on something else you mentioned when you were talking about the ICAAT. I believe that's the International Coalition Against Abuse of Covert Technology.
Oh, yeah.
You were talking about the Nuremberg Treaty and the trials of the doctors there.
Yes, yeah, that's right, yeah. There's a lovely gentleman who runs that. I've met him several times. Lars Dunsford. He runs that organisation for victims of abuse from government. Nuremberg Treaty, yes. And I quoted the Nuremberg Treaty in the report I wrote on Tetra, because what you have is you have all of the policemen and women being used now as an experiment. But in the Nuremberg Treaty, after the war, for those who don't remember that far back, after the war, the Nuremberg trials of all those guilty of war crimes was over, and a treaty was brought in called the Nuremberg Treaty, which we signed, and it says basically that if you are going to be experimented upon as our police officers or our service personnel, if you are going to be experimented upon, you have the full legal right to say no. you also have the full legal right to have every single thing explained, including the dangers, including everything that is going about to check it, but you have the full legal right to say, I do not wish to take part in this experiment, and you cannot be victimized for not taking part. Now, none of the police officers were offered that. They were all jointly signed up by just one person who said, I will sign the police officers up. There you are, there's the signature. So in fact, technically, and I'm not legally trained, but under the Nuremberg Treaty, they do actually have a right not to be experimented on.
Yes, and the remark at the end of that, when you explained about was that there are now scientists doing things and getting away with it for which doctors were hanged at the end of the Second World War.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And in fact, there is only one concession in the Nuremberg Treaty, and that is Section 5.
Mm-hmm.
In Section 5, a doctor may experiment on his or herself. And I've only known one case of that, where a doctor deliberately gave himself a stomach ulcer to prove it was caused by a bacterium, and then he cured it with a benzene mixture. But there are scientists now, doing things to people that, if we could go back, they would be hanged for, without a shadow of a doubt, and they are getting away with it, without a shadow of a doubt.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yes. I mean, it's all very well saying that people have the right to know that they're being experimented on, but can you suggest a good method of recourse for people who find out they are being experimented on and haven't given their consent to redress the situation, or does it require more of mass awareness of the situation?
Well, in this country, oddly enough, that did come up at one of the conferences that I was attending. In fact, it was more a symposium. And somebody from the industry, that question was asked, and that's a very, very good question. It came up in a symposium, which is rather like a discussion group. And somebody from the industry said, by all means, take us to court. Our part of the trial will take about 3 years. Average court costs £100,000 a day. Go ahead. And that was their answer. So, presumably, if you've got something like £100,000 a day, and their part of the trial is going to take 3 years, you can actually do something about it. But I mean, realistically, sir, if you think, I mean, the average solicitor is what, £500 an hour? I mean, it would cost you, just to get on the starting gate, tens and tens of thousands of pounds just to get on the starting gate.
Yeah.
And you know that the government, with its government scientists, are going to stall with delay, have contradictory statements. They are going to take 50 years. So, in fact, in practice, there is something, or you could do about it, but in reality, they know that they are, at this point in time, bomb-proof. And can I give you a very good example of that?
Please do.
Now, we are all familiar with the case of Sergeant Blackman, the Royal Marine, who, and it is not in dispute that he shot an unarmed prisoner in Afghanistan, and he was given a life sentence.
Yeah.
We're all agreed there. And one of his statements that he made was that when I did it, I wasn't myself. Now, a lot of people will dismiss that, but I have a document, and I have tried to bring this up ever since, even before his trial. I went to the Royal Marine Barracks, I sent documents to his legal counsel, and I have got a document. Now, we know that 3% minimum of anybody in the armed forces is going to be sensitive to microwave irradiation. And in the military, they use microwave transmitters quite a lot, especially when you're out on patrol, like Sergeant Blackman. And one of the documents I have is that one of the symptoms from microwave irradiation to service personnel, and it actually says military personnel on the document, one of the symptoms is severe neurological disorder. You can develop that from the equipment. Now, I sent this to his legal team, and they said, we will not pursue this line of defense. Now, it could have come out in his trial that he was using equipment, and I know he was, that can cause severe neurological disorder, which can show itself in extreme violence and personality changes. Now, what we have here is a Royal Marine. He's doing a life sentence. There is a possibility that he is totally innocent, not of doing what he was doing, but he is not to blame. And if I can qualify this, if you work for me and I give you a headset for your broadcasting company that you have, if I give you a headset, I'm your boss, and I say, you use this or you're sacked, and you use it, I know that this particular headset will transmit into your brain and, in some cases, can cause suicidal tendencies, depression, or extreme neurological damage, which can be severe violence. I give this to you, you then do something which you end up in court. I am your defense team, and I do not bring this up, but I know that it could have caused it. But, being a military case, I am also the judge. Yes. So I know that it could have caused this, but I do not use it for your defense. I know it as the judge, but I do not take it into consideration when sentencing. Now, that has to be unfair in anybody's book. And I have been trying ever since this man was sentenced to get somebody to introduce this and have him retried, and nobody will touch it. Everybody is afraid to go up against the Ministry of Defence and the government. Everybody is afraid of them.
Well, I think that says an awful lot about the loyalties of members of the Bar Association, for one thing, because quite clearly that Royal Marine could have put up a valid defence in court that would have got him off, but his legal team chose to ignore that.
Exactly. And the thing is, it is not just with this, but with any case, it is provable. There are EEG tests, ECG tests, blood tests. It is provable. And all I have said to the Royal Marines, to the legal counsel, to everybody, all I have said is, look, he deserves a fair trial. All we have to do is take a few blood tests, EEG tests, give him the equipment, let him walk around for an hour transmitting, retest him, and then we can see whether he is affected. If he is affected, then it is the military who are actually to blame and not he. But nobody will do it because they are afraid to go up against the Minister of Defence, afraid to go up against government. And I even had a national reporter. I spoke to him for an hour, and he said, "I'll tell you what, Barry," he said, "this is too big." He says, "We can't even cover this. It is too big." And when somebody from a national newspaper says this is too big, then, you know, where do you go from there?
Well, it says to me that these journalists aren't really journalists, and the phrase I've heard bandied about quite a lot lately from people in the what I choose to call, rather than alternative media, the new media, they're calling these people prostitutes, and I think that's exactly what they are. They're bought and paid for, and they just do as they're told, and it's all copy and paste journalism.
Well, I mean, the thing that struck my mind when he said that to me was, well, people that own newspapers tend to own television companies and radio stations and computer companies.
Yeah.
So the chances are, if you're going against somebody that has all that clout and saying that it is your equipment that can cause this, you really aren't going to get very far. But, I mean, Sergeant Blackman isn't the only one. He is the 8th to come my way that has acted totally out of character and done something where they have wound up in prison for life. And it cannot be a coincidence, but he is the 8th, and not one country will actually do the tests, and I mean, to me, it's a miscarriage of justice. It will come out one day, but it may be too late for this gentleman here. But he could be tested, he could be found not to be responsible, and he could rejoin his regiment. And if anyone's listening and they've got any ideas of what I can do now, I'd love to hear them.
Yeah, we'd certainly love to hear them too. I mean, if anyone gets in touch with me, I'll certainly pass on the information, Barry. Something else I wanted to touch on, and it's something that I'd never really heard of until less than a decade ago, and it's fibromyalgia. Now, it's something my partner's been suffering with. She's been diagnosed about 7 years. And it did occur to me when we moved to these flats when they were brand new. Oh, sorry, it didn't occur to me that she only started to suffer from this illness shortly after we moved. And we lived in a semi-detached house before, where we got all these Wi-Fi signals here. Yeah.
Without going into too much personal detail, for the people who don't understand, could you explain basically the symptoms?
Fibromyalgia sufferers tend to suffer random pain anywhere and everywhere on their bodies for no apparent reason. They suffer really bad fatigue and the various other symptoms associated with it. They're the two main ones, I think. And I had a listener who's also been on the show contact me a few days ago, just before I contacted you, Barry. And he said he'd been doing some experimentation as a result of his own fibromyalgia, and found that if he was within half a metre of a 3G phone, his fatigue became much worse.
Yeah, it is well documented that certain populations are particularly sensitive to microwaves when it comes to their sense organs. Their sense organs tend to go into overflow or some sort of hyper excitable state. In other words, the pain sensors will suddenly switch on and you will have an immense pain. Or the heat sensors will switch on and you will feel incredibly itchy and sweaty and hot. Or you will, the taste sensors will go, and the most common symptom there is some people say it's like you've got a spoon in your mouth. or your hearing particularly, and you hear like tinnitus. You hear a constant whine, a constant buzz. You can even hear, it's called synthetic telepathy. You can even hear voices, sounds, the sense organs, and there are two routes that the body can take to trigger them, and I won't go into the physiology of this, it's quite complex, but there are two methods by which the sense organs can be, if you like, triggered into overload. So, and it can be one of them, it can be all of them, it can be any combination of them. But pain is a very common one, hearing is a very common one, tasting again is very common, and it can be at particular times of the day, sometimes usually when you're laying on the bed, because people forget that the bed springs act as an aerial. They will absorb the microwaves and beam them upwards into your body. There are lots of things here which can trigger them, but there are several research articles that do show any of the sense organs can go into overload. And it can be immensely painful as well. Or whatever it is, can be immensely annoying, and can drive people to suicide, without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah. Well, the reason I asked about fibromyalgia, because when my partner was diagnosed with it, it was something I'd never, if I'd heard of it, it was only in passing. But now it seems like every third or fourth person you talk to is suffering from it. And in that time, we've gone from Wi-Fi being a bit new to all of a sudden everybody's got Wi-Fi.
Well, of course, in this country, people are actually making a lot of money putting Wi-Fi out. It is an immensely powerful industry, and the government advisors in this country do not believe that Wi-Fi will make you feel warm in 6 minutes, and therefore advise all of the councils, all of the planners, it is deemed safe. And of course, it is a very desirable technology because it makes an immense amount of money for everybody involved. And this is why when over half the world is cutting back and pulling back on Wi-Fi, we are actually taking it into every single classroom, every nursery, we're giving it to every child, putting it up everywhere, and we are Wi-Fiing every city we possibly can, with sort of a blanket mesh of Wi-Fi. So it's to do with what I call intentional ignorance. Advisors are deliberately being intentionally ignorant over the real dangers of this, and everybody is taking as much as they can, as quickly as they can before the bubble bursts.
We talked to some extent mostly about microwaves, and the obvious device which we haven't really mentioned, or we've only mentioned in passing, is the microwave oven. And I've read quite a bit saying that microwave ovens are incredibly dangerous. They destroy all the nutrition in your food, and there are dangers from the microwaves leaking out. Could you comment on that at all, please, Barrie?
Yeah, originally they were banned, microwave ovens, especially in Russia, and it wasn't until sort of the wall came down and Russia went into capitalism that they went out. But microwave ovens in general, I have never come across one that does not leak. Even if you go to them in shops with a microwave detector and you say, can I see this work? Put the detector in front of the microwave oven and it will usually go off. And that is particularly dangerous for women because microwave ovens tend to be at breast level.
Yeah.
And it is an immensely powerful machine. It is at the frequency which is known to cause cancer, and if they are leaking and you're standing in front of them, you are in danger of developing cataracts or cancer of the eye, of the breast, of the skin, standing in front. So just to have one, they are immensely dangerous. And if you don't want to hire a detector to see if your microwave oven leaks, just get your cell phone, turn it on, put it inside a microwave oven, shut the door, and then get somebody to ring it. And if it rings, you know the microwaves are going in and out. It's one way. Now, the other thing is that microwaves are known to affect water. Mm-hmm. It's how microwave ovens work.
Yeah.
They change the water. They change the actual structure of the water. So when you put food into a microwave oven, the microwaves, as well as heating up the water in the food, they change the structure of the water. They can also change the protein structure in the food. Mm-hmm. And of the 100,000 different protein structures that we know are sort of in tissues, only 600 are actually understood. So you are creating protein structures which are hitherto unknown. And if they are unknown, you have absolutely no idea how they're going to react or what they're going to do in the body. And that is a very, very dangerous thing to do. It is to put protein structures, really like different viruses. Viruses are really just protein structures of DNA. What you're really doing is putting different structures into the body where you've got absolutely no idea how they will interact with the other chemicals in the body. So you should certainly not do any food for a child in a microwave oven, particularly baby's milk. If you want to heat up your food and you're an adult, then okay, that's your affair, the same that you can choose to drink alcohol or smoke.
Yeah.
But if you are going to use a microwave oven, you should really test it. If you don't test it, don't stand in front of it when it is on, particularly if you're a woman. But I mean, if you can get away without it, you're better off not using one at all.
Thank you for that, Barry. We've got a question here from Lee in the chat room, and I know this is a particularly personal one for Lee. He's asking, what does Barry think of radiotherapy as a therapy?
Well, again, it's good and bad. Microwaves can be used to warm tissue, and they can be used to generate healing properties in tissue. But it's a bit like X-rays or any other form of ray. There is a minimum dose. And if you stick to the minimum dose and it is being applied by a professional, then it will probably do you more good than harm. But the problem is, if you go over that dose, it's a bit like, again, smoking or alcohol. Once you go over what is considered a safe limit, then you will end up doing yourself harm. Microwaves, they can interfere with the neurological systems in the body. They can interfere with the brain waves. Mm-hmm. They can interfere with the electronic signaling, where all of the electronic signals are sent around the body. So they can do an immense amount of harm, but they can do good if they are used professionally by a professional who knows what they're doing in that one small particular area.
Thank you, Barry. Lee also asks, what is a minimum safe dose, brackets time?
What is the safe time to be microwaved?
Mm-hmm. For radiotherapy?
In physiotherapy?
In radiotherapy, sorry.
Radiotherapy, yeah. Well, again, and this is why people who do this, radiographers, they study an immensely complicated course for something like 6 years. Mm-hmm. And they will judge your tissue type, the particular frequency, the power. There are many considerations that they will go into, and they're mathematical considerations. So if you're saying to me, what is the safe level, the only thing I can say is you need, for that particular wavelength and the person who is trained to use it, you would have to accept their judgments, because I don't know. It depends on the moisture content, the density, whether they're doing bone, whether they're doing tissue, how much fluid is there, the distance. There are so many variables that they study over the 6 years that only they know whether it is safe or not. And I certainly don't know. I'm not a radiographer. One of my degrees is nuclear and atomic physics. I know what's going on, but a radiographer is specialized in using it as a medicine, and I'm not. So I'm really not qualified to answer that question, sir. You would have to ask somebody who is.
I'm with you. Yeah, I appreciate someone who says I don't know. That's a really good answer, rather than some people who just tend to waffle on and say the first thing that comes into their head and lead people down all kinds of blind alleys. Right, I've covered most of the questions that I've got. Is there anything you particularly like to talk about now, Barry?
One of the other things that people overlook, that we've spoken about microwaves. Mm-hmm. We've not spoken about what is, in fact, the most dangerous part of the microwaves. Along with the microwaves, you have bits added in, and this is for speech and colour and movement and all the things you get, other than just an ordinary microwave that would tend to give you speech like a telephone. I mean, these days you want all sorts of things. And this is the most dangerous thing. These are the pulse frequencies or modulations. Right. And this is not a new phenomena. In fact, it goes back to a scientist called Ptolemy, spelled with a P, who was a Greek living in Egypt in 64 BC. This is when the first paper was written on the dangers of what you are now holding up to your head. 64 BC. And what this gentleman did, he found that if he took a wheel, a solid wheel, and drilled holes through around the circumference, and he held the wheel up and spun it against the sun, the different flashes or pulses or modulations coming through into the eyes could cause either you to become soporific, like you're drunk, or have an epileptic fit, or turn angry, and he found that at different speeds he could induce different neurological symptoms. And this is why microwaves were used as weapons during the Cold War. They were used, I have documents that show They were used by us and the Catholics in Northern Ireland. They were used by the Russians against the Americans. They were used by the Americans on the women at Greenham Common. If you send particular pulse frequencies, they can interfere with what is known as the circadian resonant frequencies of the body, or cyclotronic resonant frequencies of the body. In other words, they can make the body react differently, as well as in training the brain waves. Now, what they can do, when I was questioning spies during the Cold War, I compiled a list of some 60 different pulse frequencies that could cause everything from neurological damage to physiological damage. Like when I said to you, it is known that cell phones can change the rhythm of the heart. This is one of the ways it does it. And it can cause neurological damage in the brain by messing up the alpha, beta, gamma, theta rays of the heart, of the brain. And in fact, it's been published in the Lancet, which is a doctor's comic, as I call it, but a scientific paper, that a child who uses a cell phone for just 2 minutes, their brain will not return to normal for 2 hours afterwards. And it can manifest itself in any form of behavior that the brain cares to distribute, be it aggression or sleepiness or not wanting to learn. So if you think of a child in a playground using a cell phone and then going to lessons, the child is not going to be normal. And if it uses the cell phone again at lunchtime, you actually have a child whose brain is never normal. And this is called entrainment. And entrainment can develop into what is known as long-term potentiation, and that can last up to 6 weeks. Hence, I'm coming back to the military people or police. People who are heavy users of cell phones, their brains may be entrained for up to 6 weeks, and it can show itself in usually suicidal tendencies or depression or anger, or even, if the pulse frequency is right, sexual aggression is a known pulse frequency. And today's list, where we had sort of 50 or 60, today's list is in excess of 600 now. So it's not something which is going away, and it can affect, in an adult, it can affect any of the 4,500 biological structures in the body, including every area of the brain. In a child, it's about 4,050, but there is no way, absolutely no way, you can use a cell phone, make a call, turn it off, and not be affected somehow. There is absolutely no way you can do that.
Wow, that's quite disturbing news. I have got another question has been put in the chat room by Ian Alone, and they're asking, if taking a flight, is one body scanner serious enough? I presume they mean serious enough to do you permanent damage.
There are people I know that have had cancer where the doctor, and the doctors will not be named because they work for the NHS, and I have known 3 doctors who have tried to bring this up, that have been told by the government, you work for the NHS, if you disagree with our policy, leave and leave today. So I do know of people who have had cancer who have been told, do not use a body scanner at an airport. Tell them you have had cancer and ask to be taken to a room, strip searched, whatever, but do not use the body scanner. I suspect, and again, it's a bit like saying if I smoke one cigarette, will I be okay? The chances are, I would think most people would probably get away. If you are going through airports and they continually scan you, that would worry me. And again, we're coming back to what is the safe level for you for these particular x-rays. And again, it really depends on you. And we are now back to the experts, the radiographers. They would determine what would be safe. But my advice, and I'm not a radiographer, would be if you are prone to cancer, if you've had cancer, if somebody in your family's had cancer, ask to be taken to a room and strip searched and avoid it.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for that. And something, I don't know if we've got, we should have time to
we're down to about a quarter of an hour now, and then I've got all my calls from the States coming in.
Yeah, excellent. What I would like to ask you is, Sarah was supposed to be joining us tonight, Sarah Goodley, but unfortunately they've got electricity problems. So she's asked me to ask you about the possible performance enhancing benefits of microwaves for athletes, and I believe this is something that you suspect may have been used in the 2012 Olympics?
Not performing enhancing, it's the opposite.
Oh, sorry.
It's actually to slow people down and make them make mistakes.
Right.
Somebody asked this at a conference once. They said, could you microwave somebody's brain and affect their performance if they were a sports person? And I said, it is so easy, I could do it. If I could go to any high street shop, buy the equipment, and if I set it up, I could easily affect somebody's performance. If you think about it, what I've been talking about, entrainment of the brain, or if you send a microwave to the heart and affect the pulse rhythm. Now, I mean, I won't say it over the air. I do know the pulse frequency or modulation frequency that can collapse the lungs and the heart. There is a particular frequency that the military know, and they know that if they beam this at any enemy that is charging them or any uncontrollable crowd that they want to control, and I'm not going into the ethics of this, or anybody they don't like, there is a particular frequency that is known to collapse the heart and the lungs. There is a particular frequency that will affect the output of the brain to control the vagus nerve that controls all of the muscles in the body. They are known. Now, all you would have to do, if you wanted to affect an athlete, let's say doing the 100-yard sprint or a high jump or whatever, all you have to do as that athlete is approaching the starting block or whatever is just with a pencil thin beam, which is indetectable by sight or feeling. You wouldn't know it was coming towards you, and I can qualify that as well. All you have to do is beam this particular frequency to their body. It goes straight through the skull, straight through the clothing, straight through the skin, as if it weren't there, and it can change the rhythm of the heart, it can change the rhythm of the brain, it can collapse the lungs, and you only need to beam them for, while they start and halfway through the race, and then turn it off, and it'll do the rest. And by the time they finish, it is almost indetectable unless you do some specific biochemical tests. You would never know, and they are not on the drugs test list. So unless you did specific tests, you would never know. It would just be that they ran so many seconds slower than they would normally run. And you can aim it at the knee joint, the hand, the brain, the eye, the lung, the heart. You can aim it anywhere. You can cover the whole body. And that is done. And people are going to say, I don't believe you now, but I can assure you what I'm saying is true. I've got no reason to sit here and lie. And not only is it true, but it's actually been to court. It has been this particular method or phenomenon has been picked up by chain stores. And it started off whereby in the United States, if a thief or shoplifter was going into a chain store, there are devices which are patented. If you suspect somebody of being a shoplifter, you can have one of these little devices, you can beam it at their head. It's called auditory hallucination or synthetic telepathy, both mean the same thing. And as the person is looking or picking up something to steal, they will physically hear a voice that says, we are watching you, put it back and leave the store. And the person will look round, not see who said it, and leave the store. And it was designed and patented for that reason. But somebody, and you don't need more than sort of 2 brain cells connected together to say, well, hang on, if you're going to say put that back, you can also say to innocent people, oh, you really want to buy this, or your girlfriend would love this, and you can put telepathic messages into their heads. And they found, one chain store found that in, I think it was a 9-month period, that doing this to people, the sales went up by $60,000. And they were taken to court. But when the government expert scientists turned up and said, look, there is no harm here, they are not causing harm. And in fact, the case was won by the industry, with excellent barristers and people that they have, and it was deemed not illegal to send a message to somebody's head. And they got away with it. And it has since been picked up by fast food companies and other chain stores, and as far as I know, is spreading all over the place, whereby, you're told, you're more hungry than you feel, or you can buy this. So it is basically the same thing as if you were to target an Olympic athlete. You can slow them down, you can collapse lungs, or you can put messages in their brain. It's the same thing.
So that's just made me think of another story that I read about some time ago. I think it was in the first invasion of Iraq. Many Republican guards came out of their foxholes and surrendered to no one.
It is used by the military. It has been for ages.
Yeah. So that was more than likely microwave technology. And you see all too many reports of microwave weapons being used against angry mobs. And Chris in the chat room...
Not just that, sir. It's used against religious groups as well. But in particular of religious groups, because certain religious groups, they tend to all meet at a certain time on a certain day, and if you don't like a particular religious group, and there are several, I'm not isolating one, there are several, they are very easy to target because the microwaves go straight through the brick and attack the people. And if you know that at this time of the day they're all going to be there, be it a Sunday or a Monday or a Saturday, religious groups are targeted, as well as angry mobs, as well as terrorists, as well as foreign armies. It is a very sophisticated weapon, and is still used today, and it has been used since the 50s for this very purpose.
Well, Chris just posted a link in the chat room, and it's an article on Russia Today entitled "Microwave Goodbye Weapon, Heat Ray Crowd Dispersal Cannon Unveiled," and it says that the American military have presented the world with a new weapon. Informally named the heat ray or microwave cannon, the active denial system is a non-lethal weapon primarily designed for crowd control. So this stuff it's kind of out there in your face, but an awful lot of people, when you try and tell them about this technology, say, well, you're talking rubbish. Can't possibly do such thing. It's pure fantasy.
Oh, no, it is. And you can actually go with, have you heard of the HARP complex in Alaska? In fact, there are several HARPs all over the world now, which are multi-transmitting arrays of 40, 50 transmitters. They can beam microwaves into the atmosphere. They reflect off of the ionosphere, and by simple geometry, really, that could be done by a 12-year-old, you can just reflect the rays off of the ionosphere down into any country you like, and you can destroy, because when we're talking about destroying cellular structures, we're not just talking people, we are talking every single living cell on the planet, all plants, all trees, all animals, all insects. Every single living thing can be destroyed by microwaves. So if you wanted to, you can have one of these HARP weapons just reflect off the ionosphere, and you can destroy a country's entire crops, entire animal species. You can get rid of the insects they use for pollinating. You can change weather without any trouble at all by targeting the jet stream. So, I mean, microwaves, instead of being harmless, they have become the new hydrogen bomb, Cold War. It is now, we all have the technology with microwaves to destroy and utterly destroy each other's countries by whichever means we choose. And they have now become the new atomic bomb.
Wow. That is astounding and at the same time slightly terrifying.
Well, if you think of it, any tree can read our DNA sequence. It won't do it any good because it has its own DNA and ours isn't needed. But any tree can read our DNA sequence. And in fact, when you get down to the 4 bases of DNA, they are the same in every living species, even bacterium. And microwaves are known to disrupt these bases. So with microwaves, you can, and it has been done, you can destroy any living structure on the planet from any part of the planet. As I say, it is the new atomic bomb, and it is now sort of the new standoff Cold War, because once America built the new HARP system that could change weather or affect any country anywhere in the world, you have other countries saying, well, we're going to have this as well, and they've built theirs, and other countries have built theirs, and now they've all got them. So we're now back to where, and I can remember the time when there were so many atomic bombs in the world that there was enough just to rock the Earth totally off of its axis. We're now in that situation with microwaves, where at the push of a button, you can physically destroy any country you like, any crop you like. You can change the weather. You can do what you like now just by pushing a button.
Wow. That takes me exactly to something else Sarah was talking about.
Yeah, we've only got 5 minutes.
I realise we haven't got time to talk about it tonight, but you've been an absolutely fantastic guest, Barrie, and I've learned an awful lot from you, and I hope the listeners have too. We would love to get you back on sometime, and I know Sarah Goodley would love to have a chat with you about how microwaves and all these frequencies affect mitochondrial DNA, but that's for another time.
Yeah, I can go through the entire process for her. I can go through every single stage in the cell.
Wow, thank you. Well, I'd just like to say a big thank you to Tom. Unfortunately, you couldn't join in tonight, mate, for joining me. And a very big thank you to joining us, Barrie, and we hope we'll be able to get you on sometime very soon. Thank you very much.
And thank you to that lady who sent in those really brainstorming, brilliant questions about breast cancer.
Thank you, Yvonne. Yes. Thanks, everybody. We'll be back on Friday night. Believe we've got Paul Webster coming back on to tell us some new information he's got. And then on Friday, we've got Steve Johnson, the man who sees the future, along with Chi Master Frank Willis. So an interesting week. Stay tuned for Graham Hart, who'll be on straight after us. And I know Graham's got a fascinating show lined up. And we'll play out with a song I think that is quite apt.